So hello, and my name is Peter Chen. We've got a bunch of participants on the line, and I want to start uh, relatively quickly because I know that folks have a lot going on. So I know folks are going to jump on, but I want to go ahead and get started. Um, so if you're here to learn about the Census Push Week, which is scheduled for the last week in July. And we have some outstanding panelists here from the New Jersey Secretary of State's office, as well as from the US Census Bureau. So from the Secretary of State's office, we have Eric Kipnis. And from the Census Bureau, we have our New York Regional Director, Jeff Baylor. For folks who have questions, I encourage you to use the Q&A function. Alana Vega, my colleague and Kids Count coordinator, is going to be monitoring the Q&A feed. And we'll go ahead and answer questions at the end, but I want to make sure that folks know that if they have questions, they can flag them in there. So please use the Q&A function for questions. I'm going to go ahead and get started because, like I said, I want to try to keep us moving, and I want to make sure there's enough time for questions because I'm sure folks will have many. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about Census Push Week, which is scheduled for the last week of July, July 27th through August 2nd. Talk a little bit about what your event should be looking for. Talk about the final pitch for how to put your message together. Registering your event, which we'll show you on our webpage, and finally, how to engage your partners, specifically the Secretary of State and the Census Bureau. And we're really, I do want to say our Census Bureau regional office has been super helpful and responsive. So if you have not reached out to them for assistance and to your partnership specialist, I really encourage you to do so. They always have great ideas, materials, and other information as for us about how to go about our operations. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with just the timing. So as you know, the census extended self-response until August 11th, when its enumerators will go out into the field and start knocking on doors for homes that have not yet responded to the census. And that really means that we have a last chance to get as many self-responses as possible in the last week of July. I do want to flag one more date, though, which is July 24th through 26th, which is the Census Bureau's planned Faith Weekend. Now, there have been a number of Faith Weekends so far, but again, this one is really the last chance to push some of this information, and especially because religious institutions, houses of worship, have some relaxed, it can now be open and have people in them post-COVID. Not post-COVID, but in this phase of COVID reopening. We're hoping that there can be a big push around that as well. So events for Push Week can also be targeted to that Faith Weekend. So let's talk about where New Jersey stands right now. So as of July 9th, 2020, the state response rate was 64%. That's a little bit behind our 2010 rate of 67.6%, but it's still substantially ahead of the national rate, about 2 points. But I do want to say that there was really terrible timing with coronavirus. The main push was really around April 1st, and a lot of the mailings went out around then, and that was the same time as a lot of the COVID-19 shutdowns. So obviously that had a big impact on our ability to get some census events going. And the hard to count areas were hit even harder than the state overall. So if we look at this list of just a few of the hardest to count areas in New Jersey, you can see that they lag behind the state rate, which we expect, but they also lag pretty far behind their 2010 self-response rate. So that means that even compared to the census cycle 10 years ago, these areas are lagging behind where they performed previously. And I think that's true across the board, and that's true nationally. I think a lot of New Jersey communities have done a great job of getting out the word about census, but the reality is that we're still behind in a lot of key areas. I'm just going to blow through this because you all know why the census is so important. It's more important than just a head count. It affects funding, it affects political representation, it affects our district lines. But this is really a last chance for public attention. If you look at the overall census response rates nationally, it really focused on April 1st, and then it really flattened out after that. And so we're looking for, the Census Bureau is trying to create a week of action similar to that April 1st push. So trying to get media attention, trying to get public attention. And I think one thing that we've seen, particularly for a lot of folks who are grantees on the call of either the Secretary of State's office or the Fund for New Jersey or other organizations that have funded census work, is the digital outreach has really been tapped out. There's only so many webinars and census Q&As that can reach the hard-to-count folks. The folks who have not responded yet are really, they either have chosen not to respond, or they have not been in those digital contacts because they're not connected to social media networks and that kind of outreach. And that digital outreach is really, we've reached the limits there. With loosening COVID-19 restrictions and moving through new phases in reopening, I think there are opportunities for in-person contact, and we know that that kind of in-person contact is needed for the final persuasion. This is not something that can be resolved with just a Facebook ad. Conversations are often going to be needed to persuade people to complete their census, and spending the extra time to get a census response right then and there is as important, maybe more important than flyering a neighborhood. Really, this is about all hands on deck, particularly for organizations that have on the ground direct services. Oftentimes the folks who have been doing the census work are not necessarily plugged in with all of the rest of their organization's direct service or childcare or other services. And this is really a moment for all of those services, all of those employees, staff, volunteers to be pushing the census for that week. Now, what should this push week event look like? I think this is going to be different depending on what kind of organization you are, what kind of nonprofit you are. But the goal is to maximize census self-response. Okay? We want to convert non-responders into responders. We want to focus on how to get the census done right then and there. The online option with a smartphone is obviously the most straightforward, but the phone option we should not downplay. Many folks do feel comfortable with the phone option, especially because it has language support for people who may not understand all the things that the census is asking. And people may need persuasion. If people have not responded, there's a reason for it, and that nudge may require a personal approach. Thinking about why the census mattered to me. Why did I complete my census form? Why does it matter for our community? And when thinking about the neighborhoods that have the hard to count populations, why they matter to those neighborhoods and those communities. Where's my, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about the basic logistics: who, what, when, where, why, how. Who, the audience, what are you gonna do, when you're gonna do it, where you're going to do it, and finally, how to do it with social distancing and cultural competence. So the who, hard to count communities is the game plan here. Trying to match the messengers with the appropriate communities is going to be very important. If you're living if you're trying to reach a neighborhood that's primarily Spanish speaking, you should probably have some folks who are Spanish speaking. And really think about the service population if you are a direct service provider. So if you're a food pantry, think about the service population that you reach and how to communicate and how to get census responses from that population. So here are some of the activities that you might consider with in-person contact. And I want to say, different organizations are going to have different comfort level with these kinds of activities, because different organizations have different levels of comfort with their COVID reopening. They might be at different stages. So these are not one size fits all. I think it's really about knowing your community and knowing what you're capable of, but trying to make sure that you have an activity on the books for this push week. So door-to-door canvassing is obviously one of the most effective strategies. And thinking about giveaways, whether it's, I think mask and food distribution has been helpful as far as something to entice people to open the door and have that conversation. And pairing census activities with those distribution sites can be helpful. Whenever people are waiting in line, right, they need something to do. And getting people to complete their census while they're waiting in line can be hugely important. Direct service waiting rooms, you've seen on the news all the people waiting at the Motor Vehicle Commission, right? If people are waiting for something, whether it's tax prep, if it's the WIC office, if it's an FQHC, that's an opportunity for having a conversation and sharing information about the census. There's the Census Bureau has what are called mobile questionnaire assistance sites. That's where the Census Bureau basically has tablets and a wireless hotspot that they can go to a site and provide allow people the ability to complete their census right then and there. And we've heard in other states about pairing that with a food truck. So you have a food truck, and while people are waiting for their food, they fill out their census. And then finally thinking about something like taking 15 minutes from a church service to complete the census. Everyone take out your phone. We're going to all take this time right now and do this. I really want to emphasize the key here has got to be about active time. Passive tabling, just sort of like having a station there for people to, pass by in a parking lot. It's really not going to get the volume of responses needed to get a lot of, this has really got to be about reaching out directly and contacting people and finding where they're going to already be, rather than hoping that they sort of pass by and talk to you. So the target dates here are July 27th through August 2nd. And just think about when you're going to have the most foot traffic and who else might be doing something that week that does have foot traffic. I know that there are a lot of even the coronavirus testing sites where people are waiting in line. That may be somewhere to think about working with your county or city to promote the census at those sites. So I'm going to go to the Census Hard to Count Maps website here to talk about where. So if you go to Census Hard to Count Maps, which is linked in our PowerPoint, which we will be sharing after this ends, you can see, this map. Does everyone see the map? Is everyone good on that? Okay, so if people see the map, this is my neighborhood. Okay, this is my census tract, tract 73. And when you click on it, you can find over here on census details for tract 73, you can find out some of the populations that may be undercounted. So we see that my tract is 41% Hispanic and 7% Black. And we can also see, if we look at risks of undercounting young children, that 83.8% live in immigrant families, and 51% of households are limited English-speaking households. So that tells you something, right, about what that census tract looks like. And as we zoom in on the census tract, I can turn down the transparency, and I can sort of take a closer look and see what there is in this neighborhood, right? I see that there's a grocery store here. It's no longer Pathmark, actually. It's a Seabra, which is a Portuguese grocery store. But the point is, you can take a closer look and identify what is in this neighborhood. Is there a social service agency? Is there a doctor's office? Is there a store that people are going to be reaching out to? So using this tool, you can type in any address you want in this corner here, this address bar, and you can identify where those hard to count areas are and what those characteristics are for those neighborhoods. Okay, and then finally, how? So social distancing is obviously going to be extremely important. Wearing masks and gloves, as well as having hand sanitizer and maintaining 6 feet of distance, can be helpful for folks, particularly those who are concerned about coronavirus. And we know that our hard to count areas also overlap with the areas that had high coronavirus infection and death rates. The state guidelines for group size are on the state's website, but roughly speaking, it's 100 people inside or 25% of capacity and 500 people outside. So whatever your event is, make sure you're complying with the state guidelines for group size. Thinking about reaching out to local media to cover your event. A lot of media are looking for stories now that are not necessarily COVID specific. So I really encourage you to reach out, especially non-English media or like ethnic media that may be more likely to reach those hard-to-count populations. And really think about the cultural competence. If someone hasn't responded, there's a reason for it. And being respectful and understanding of why they might not have responded can be extremely helpful in identifying how to persuade them to respond. And really make sure that everyone has language support for the targeted populations. Okay, onwards. So the final pitch, look, this should be second nature to most folks at this point, but the census is safe, easy, and important. It's collecting very basic information about the household. It only takes 10 minutes to complete. And there are the reasons why people haven't completed. It's pretty clear: fear, distrust of the government. There are lots of other things that people are paying attention to other than the census. People may have thought the census was over. One of the most common Google searches about the census recently was, "Is the census over?" No, it is not. And people who didn't realize they had to do it or felt like it didn't matter if they did it. So we have to think about messaging that's going to reach them, focusing on the impact of census for community funding, healthcare, emergency services, roads, and schools. Reinforcing the protections for confidentiality, that all of your personal data is completely confidential and protected by federal law. Go through exactly what is collected, and you can even show people on their phones exactly what they are filling out. And then I think this is really important. Explaining why you personally completed your census is extremely important, particularly for folks who may be reluctant. Explaining why it was important for you makes it personal and makes that connection with them. And show how easy it is on your phone, listen to their concerns. Remind people to include every person who lives at their address. That includes extended relatives, people who are only staying there for a short period. And remind them that this is the last chance to avoid having a federal employee knock on their door, which they will be doing as of August 11th. We are encouraging people to register their events. Again, this link will be sent out to all the webinar participants afterwards, along with our PowerPoint presentation. But if you go to our website here, you will see this handy Google form, and you can just fill out the information for your event, contact person, organization, what the event is, what kind of event, when, where, and languages. And we will be compiling all of those and making them public so that we can coordinate some of those activities and make sure that they are publicized across the state, and try to reach out to some media about those events as well. Where am I? Okay, I have tried to keep things brief, and I have done so. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to the Secretary of State's office and Eric Kipnis. I know that there are lots of questions in the Q&A, so please continue submitting them. We'll get to questions after Eric finishes his presentation. So I'm going to head and stop sharing my screen, and we can turn things over to Eric.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Peter. Every time you present, I learn something new, so thank you. That was, and I hope everybody else felt the same way, really very to the point presentation with lots of good information. I'm going to give me a second while I share my screen with everybody. And let's see. Let's make sure that I hit the share button. That would help. Okay, give me 1 second and we'll get my presentation going. And there it is. Okay, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Kipnis. I am the Manager of Constituent Relations for the New Jersey Department of State. A lot of you know me. For those of you who don't, my job for the last almost 2 years primarily has been to help to coordinate along with our partners and build a census advocacy and grassroots outreach effort for across the state. And for all of you on the phone, or well, for all of you on the, not on the phone, because pretty much all of you are on Zoom itself. I want to thank you for all of your work. I know you have all been working incredibly hard. There's a reason why our numbers are ahead of the national average. We have a lot more work to do. We all know that, but given what we have gone through in this state, the work has been absolutely outstanding. So thank you. The Secretary of State thanks you, by the way, as does my my partner Lauren Zarek, who may be on the call. I'm not sure, but in any case, thank you for all of your help. So here's what I'm going to do today, just to add to what Peter had to say, and that is, I want to go over among some general practice, some general concepts about event organizing, some specific best practices, and then some ideas for events. Some of you will have heard some of these ideas and thoughts before, but as advertised, this is a refresher and a quick-paced one. So I'm going to get going on this. Couple of general thoughts to keep in mind. If there was ever a time to put your teams and your local complete count committees and your organized trusted messengers into play, this is it. We have been waiting for this. This is what we were going to do before COVID hit. And we don't know how long this virus is going to give us. So we want to get as much in as we can, as quickly as we can. So as Peter said, we can reach our hard to count communities and increase the number of people right now filling out the census. Just a general concept that you want to think about as you move through your activities this week and what they're going to be all about. They're going to be about asking. Bottom line for push week, bottom line for even down the stretch, because we want to be thinking about that as well, even past push week, but particularly for push week, is that you get what you ask for and not much of what you don't, and we're going to be doing a lot of asking. And organizing, as a lot of you know, and that's what we're doing, we're organizing activities and events and we're running them. It's all about asking. So what will we be asking for this week? You know, as we organize and run our activities for the census? Well, first of all, we're going to be asking for volunteers. You're going to need people to help you with this. And we're going to be also asking people, first and foremost, to fill out their census and make a commitment to fill out their census. That's the main goal. That's the main goal. Increase the number of people filling out the census. In that vein, I want to talk a little bit, and some of you have seen this before, about a 5-step approach to making an ask. As you have your conversations with people, to keep these things in mind, the conversations that Peter has been talking about, and I've modified them a little bit based on what we're about to do during push week. First of all, always know your audience. Tailor your ask and your attitude and your language and your message to your audience. Peter pointed out, if you're in a Spanish-speaking area, try to have Spanish speakers there. Understand what the community, you all know what your community, what your community's culture is like, and you know you're going to need to play to that clearly. We provided some good general messaging, but you may need to adapt it, and that is fine. In fact, it is expected. Build some urgency. Why is this so important to do right now? This is the persuasive part of the conversation. It's also a great place to talk about why it was important to you and why it was important to you now. As Peter said, a personal message, really, really important. You're going to be asking for something very specific. In the case of volunteers, you're going to be asking them to make a commitment to volunteer. But specifically, you're going to be asking people to fill out the census or make a commitment to fill it out, because there's going to be still some people on the fence, but that doesn't mean you can't make a commitment. You can't ask them for a commitment for those who are still on the fence to think about it and to get it done by a particular date. But our real emphasis, as Peter's mentioned, is right then and there, whether you're holding a tablet or asking people to fill it out on their phone, or you're at a table where there's a laptop, maybe at a food distribution location. Once you've made the ask and it looks like you're going to get a yes, stay silent. No need to talk anymore. Just get the form filled out at that point. But be persistent. Again, you may need to persuade. Try to get to yes in a courteous way. Those are five basic steps to making any kind of ask. We talked about I talked about volunteers before. Some of you may be wondering, how do I've been to the well a lot. How am I going to get volunteers and more volunteers? Here's just a reminder of the kinds of places that you can go. First and foremost, your existing networks, your friends, their friends, relatives, and neighbors. Many of you have participated in our Friends and Family Outreach program. Great place to start to see if they're able to or willing to and comfortable with it. And again, there needs to be a comfort zone to come out and help. Of course, staying within CDC and the state guidelines to come out and help with these activities. Reach out to community organizations, again, your local partner organizations and nonprofits. While you're advertising the activity, see who might want to participate in those activities. Faith community congregants. Peter mentioned that earlier in his presentation. And of course, social media. You can and should promote your event as much as possible. That's the best way to get an event to happen and to get activity at the event and to get volunteers for the event, is to promote it. Social media is a great place to do that. Little bit of a quick event organizing review, because we're at the point where you're all thinking about, what will I do? Some of you are already in the midst of it. Just some general basic rules to go by, and some basic ideas. As I mentioned before, put your local complete count committee team into play. Don't try and do this all by yourself. It doesn't work. For those of you who've been to my training, to our earlier trainings, you know that if you try to do it all by yourself, you're either going to burn yourself out or you're going to hurt the effort, because you're going to need people to help you. So recruit more volunteers. How? Again, going back to what we said before, ask them. It's the best way to get a volunteer. Ask them. Some people will raise their hands all by themselves, but most people won't raise their hands until you ask them. So ask. Utilize the Census Organizing Toolkit on our website, which is census.nj.gov, and it's under Census Resources. Some of you have seen it before. Spanish version of the toolkit is up, should be by now anyway. We were tweaking it, and I know it was being posted. There is also a new document, and I'll talk about it later, to talk about safety protocols for kiosks that we've included. But utilize that toolkit. It's a great reference document. You don't need to look at all of it, but there's ideas on how to run events, specifically a guide for event organizing 101, and also other ideas for active events. So take a look at it and use it. Event organizing, some very specific things to think about. And this is lifted almost primarily from the Event Organizing 101 guide that I just mentioned. Set a time and date and place, and think about what resources you have or will need. Be ready for the event. By the way, make sure you have a sign-in sheet with you. I didn't mention that in this particular slide, but sign-in sheets are important for your volunteers, because if they're new volunteers, you'll be able to go back to them and ask them again and have their contact information. Promote the event and recruit attendees for your event. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Social media, flyers in stores, all sorts of ways to do that. You want to get as many people to come as possible, even though you're going to be going to as many ready-made activities as you can. Existing activities where you're going to find people, you're still going to need to promote the event. Every event you hold should lead to a future action. Be ready to ask your volunteers to participate in another event. There's going to be more to come. We've got till October 31st. This is going to be a final push week for August 11th, but but we're going to have more work to do. Hopefully not as much, given the success that we hope to have from this push week, but there'll be more to do. So have another event in your back pocket, maybe even two, because somebody's going to say, well, I can't make the one you're telling me about. That always happens. For your volunteers in particular, make confirmation calls to everyone who RSVPs and send them a reminder email. You will get much better volunteer attendance that way. Take pictures and celebrate your event on social media. Let the world know what you're doing. That people need to see that. It also amplifies the importance of Census and tells others in the community that this is happening and that it's important and that they should participate as well. It's almost an incentive in some cases, to participate. Here's one other thing regarding your volunteers. Make sure, please, that you thank them. If you don't do anything else, thank them. Never let a volunteer leave an event before you thank them. I have stopped conversations to thank volunteers who were about to go home. They need to hear that, because you want them to come back. Basic concept here, please, for all events: collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Work with your nonprofit partners, your local complete count committees, both municipal and county, to leverage your resources and amplify your activities. Work with your census partnership specialists. They're great folks. If you don't know who they are, any number of us on this call, from Jeff to Peter to me, can connect you with your partnership specialists. Many of you know them very, very well right at this point. Work with the NJ Census 2020 team at the NJ Department of State. We are all here to help and guide, provide as many resources as possible. You are not in this by yourself. The partnership between the Census Bureau and the Census 2020 NJ Coalition, who you should be calling on as well, is a very, very, very strong partnership. It has been from almost day one. We recognize the need to collaborate to get this job done, all of us, very, very early on. So collaborate, please. It's essential. Some of our best events have been because of collaboration and because collaboration took place. Types of activities. We're going to focus on the in-person ones for those communities and those groups who are comfortable with them. We hope a lot of you are. We want to focus on census kiosks, both mobile and permanent, at food distribution locations, COVID testing locations. We're going to try and get as many COVID testing locations posted up on our site as possible so we can share it out so you know where to go. Places of worship, libraries as they become available down the road, and at nonprofits who may not have the bandwidth themselves to do it, but might be willing to host you, even if it's outside at a table at their location. One other thing on census kiosks, you do need to follow CDC guidelines. We've posted a document that helps with that on our census.gov, census.nj.gov webpage. It's downloadable. It's a hot link document to the CDC, and little things like, don't clean your screens with abrasive or harsh materials like soap and water. Great idea came from one of our local complete count committee team leaders in Mercer County. They ran out of wipes and Lysol spray, and they had saran wrap, and they wrapped their keyboards in saran wrap. And between users, they take it off and sanitize their hands in between, put a new piece of saran wrap on, and make it ready for somebody else. Great idea, great idea. Car caravans. They create a buzz. Coordinate those with mobile kiosks around your town, or permanent kiosks for that matter. Tables at any outdoor community events. There are some community events that are taking place, so find out what's going on in your community. See if you can get a table, again, with social distancing taking place. Chalkathons. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's chalk art events on the pavement great way to attract families and kids. You can have giveaways, and you can also have a kiosk there, a mobile kiosk. Utilize the Census Bureau's mobile questionnaire assisters, the MQAs. Peter mentioned them. You can schedule them through your partnership specialists. The good thing about mobile kiosk, about MQAs, is that they are actually official enumerators. They will get the count done right there officially. And if I'm not mistaken, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, those are considered self-response activities. It's not someone knocking at the door. It's a self-response activity. So utilize them. I'm going to give you another way to utilize them in a second. Distribute flyers about your events. Ask businesses to post flyers. Barbershops and hair salons having been open, great places to find out, to not only talk to about the census, but ask them if you can host an MQA or a kiosk, particularly at very busy ones. Virtual activities are still in play. I mean, the virus is here. Not everybody's going to be comfortable with in person, so continue virtual kiosks. Idea that I saw, Census Block Party. Utilize the Census Bureau's mobile questionnaire assistance, but in a different way. Organize lists of those who have asked for help filling out their census, and run an event with what we would call a voice MQA. At least that's what I call it. That is an event where there is a date and time frame certain, where a census enumerator, an actual official census enumerator, will call the people who have asked for help to help them fill out the census right then and there. Utilize Friends and Family phone outreach, the Friends and Family phone outreach program. It's listed on our website. Many of you have seen it. We're going to keep promoting that. And just to throw another wrinkle in it, utilize a text outreach Friends and Family approach. We have a group that is interested in doing that, called ALFPA. It's an association of Latino professionals. And for those who are interested, I can connect you. This is just a listing of our resources. I'm not going to go list them all the way down. You'll get this when we post the document on our page and on the Coalition's page. But these are the places where you can find the information that we're talking about. We are really at a critical point, folks. We need to get the numbers up. We're doing good, but we want to do better. We need to do better. And I know from this group that you will all be out there trying as hard as you can, and it's, again, very much appreciated. And remember, as always, there is strength in numbers. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. I think we're going to go ahead and switch over to question. Now, if you look in the Q&A, Alana and Jeff have actually answered a number of questions already in the text. But Alana's going to field some questions for us to answer live. Yeah.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So the first question that we have that hasn't been answered comes from Eileen, and it is: New Jersey Democratic legislators are looking to delay the drawing of new legislative districts to 2023 if 2020 census data are not available. Can you provide an update on this? So Peter.
Okay, I will provide the update on this. I don't actually know if Jeff or Eric are allowed to. So the Census Bureau has asked Congress for to delay the its data for redistricting purposes to be delivered to the states. Now, for New Jersey's purposes, this is more of an issue because we have elections in 2021. Currently, the New Jersey legislature has before it a proposal that would keep our maps that are based on 2010 census responses until the 2023 state legislative elections. So that is the update on what is happening there. Now, there's been some discussion about what happens if there's a quote unquote bad census. I think, we are seeing that this census is different than previous censuses for a lot of reasons. But we have also seen that the Census Bureau and lots of organizations on the ground have been pushing very hard to get self-response rates higher. And it's impossible to say whether there will be an undercount until, 2 to 3 years after the census is completed. So for example, in 2010, the 2010 census, the undercount wasn't announced until like spring of 2012. So, there's lag time, and because there's lag time, it's unclear, what effect this will have on redistricting. I know that the League of Women Voters in New Jersey, which is one of our partners in the Census 2020 NJ Coalition, has been doing a lot of work on redistricting, and they have more in-depth thoughts about this than we do, but just wanted to let folks know that this is a proposal that is on the table to adjust New Jersey's redistricting timeline based on the 2010 census maps for the first year of legislative elections. Okay.
Thanks, Peter. I do want to let everyone know in the chat, I placed a link to the hard to count maps that Peter mentioned during his presentation, as well as a link to the form to register your event. And one of the attendees, Areli, has also shared a Spanish language guide for anyone who is interested. Just a reminder, folks, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A and not the chat. There's a chance we might miss them if they're in the chat, so please put them in the Q&A. So the next question is, with the window, is having an event on August 14th still possible? I'm guessing with non-response follow-up starting on August 11th, concern over whether it would still be appropriate to host something on the 14th.
So Jeff, I think that's you. Can they still have an event on the 14th? Or, will the self-response site still work on the 14th?
Yeah, absolutely. So the self-response, either online, over the phone, or if you still have your paper form, you can still mail it back in, will be available all the way up until October 31st. So it's absolutely not too late to have an event August 14th. It's just important to note that we will have staff out there knocking on doors, collecting information in person.
So I think our recommendation for nonprofits and complete count committees is after August 11th, events are okay, but knocking on doors should be left to the Bureau. So if you're planning on doing any canvassing, do it before August 11th.
So the next question, and I think there was some chatter in the chat about this, is how do we prove that undocumented will not be targeted by ICE?
Jeff, do you want to talk about Title 13? And
yeah,
maybe I can find the fact sheet and put it in the chat window.
Great. Yeah, as Peter mentioned, Title 13, the law that allows us to collect the census data, also protects every piece of data we collect. Under this law, we can never release information at the person or household level. So when you see our data, which is available to the public, you see things at a higher geographical level, a census tract, a county level, a city or a town level, a state level, congressional district level. We can never release data at the person or household level. In addition, local, state, federal law enforcement can never access our data at any time for any reason, which includes ICE and Homeland Security and IRS. And even the Patriot Act does not supersede Title 13. Title 13 put in place in 1954. We've been taken to federal court numerous times over the past 7 decades, and the Census Bureau has won every time. There has never been a breach of Title 13. In addition, everyone who's working on a census, whether you work for a 4-week operation or you're a permanent employee with the Census Bureau, we all take an oath of confidentiality. And that oath states that if we release information at the person or household level, we'll be in prison up to 5 years, fined up to $250,000. And that's an oath that lasts for life, not just while we work for the census, but for the remainder of our lives.
Yeah, and I think, when groups that are organizing immigrant populations have talked about how they've had these conversations with folks, I think it's understandable that people have fear of how their information will be used. And I think it's important to emphasize a few things. One is that the census is only asking for the most basic information. This is not asking for immigration status, citizenship information. This is just name, birth dates, and ethnicity information. It's fairly limited. And at least our outreach workers, their experience is that the confidentiality handout that the Bureau has, which I just sent to the, oh, I only sent it to all panelists, sorry. That these sheets were relatively persuasive for folks. But again, I think the key is having the conversation and trying to persuade people rather than, and understanding that there are going to be people who will say, you know, thanks, but no thanks. And that's just the reality of the political and current situation that we're in.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, so the next question that we have, and this was addressed a bit, is what is the current marketing outreach plan for the Hispanic community? Currently, the ads in Spanish are very minimal.
Yeah, so as part of Push Week, one of the things the Census Bureau is doing is they're ingesting additional funding into each region for their particular Push Week. And of course, ours is the 27th through August 2nd. So they'll be purchasing additional media buys. It's important to be considered for one of these media buys. You have to apply. And what I can do is ensure I send you all the link or send it to Peter and Alana to get this information to you afterwards. If you're aware of an outlet who may be interested, they need to apply. They need to submit a proposal, which includes their timing and the types of outlets that they are, the types of media they have, their pricing list, because our national contract will be making the decisions on in-language media buys for this particular Push Week. And that's the whole idea here is to bombard the media, social media, you know, TV, radio, print media, outdoor advertising during that week, in combination with all the great work that all of you are doing to really kind of recreate that, as Peter put it earlier, recreate that buzz that typically April 1st gets in a decennial year. And that's what we're hopeful to do. Our advertising list is available at our website at 2020census.gov, so you can see every media outlet that we have purchased media from for the 2020 census. And again, I'll make sure that information is shared with all of you afterwards.
Jeff, I just put the list into the chat window so people can click on that, and it's a giant document. Just one thing to flag is that New Jersey is not its own media market. We're part of the New York and Philly media markets primarily. So if you're looking for a specific outlet, if you hit Control F and look for the name of that outlet, it's likely to come up. If you see that there's an organization that's not listed, I included the website of the contractor that's handling the media, and you can also email them and ask what's needed for an application. And they are still taking applications for the additional media buys through. Are you guys buying through September or just through end of August?
I think right now the plan is through the end of August, but we'll see what happens.
All right.
I wanted to add a piece. I think that media ads are very, very effective, obviously. They provide the air cover, so to speak, for the effort on the ground. Ultimately, it will be the effort on the ground that is going to get the job done. Certainly making people aware of it ahead of time via media is important and reinforces it. That's one of the reasons that we have formed local complete count committees the way we have across the state, so that the committees at the local level can speak in the language and in the vernacular of their communities. It's going to be important for all the teams on the ground to also add to that message that these events are going to occur. That makes the amplification considerably more powerful. I just want to add that piece in.
And I'll also say, you know, these local media agencies can cover the stuff too. So thinking about what you know, it's interesting. Eric mentioned the barbershops and nail salons, right? When you go to your barbershop, what's that paper that's sitting on the counter there? And what radio station are they listening to? Those are the, you know, that's who to think about as in terms of outreach, right? Like, and they can write a story, they can do a story on your event. So really try to keep those local media in mind.
So the next question, thank you both. Thanks to everyone. The next question we have is should be a quick answer. Can we get paper forms in bulk? I have not seen this option offered. I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but I will put that to Jeff.
Yeah, that's correct. The answer is no. There will be no blank paper forms as there were in 2010 with the introduction of both online and over the phone. That has been removed from the planning for 2020. So no blank paper forms are available.
But there is a reminder card going out. It's already in process, right, Jeff?
Yeah, at the end of July, there'll be a postcard mailed to every household that has yet to respond to the 2020 census, in both English and Spanish, and bilingual postcard that will include the toll-free telephone numbers, as well as the URL to go my2020census.gov.
Which makes the timing of push week so perfect.
There is an effort on the part of some nonprofits and complete count committees to encourage the Bureau to put out a second paper questionnaire mailing. And I know because a number of the people attending this webinar signed on to it, which is great. But as of now, the Bureau has no plans to make additional paper questionnaires available. Hopefully they will, though. Not that Jeff has anything to do with it, but
I hope so too.
Thank you, Peter, for mentioning that. We did have someone ask, will the Census Bureau send a paper questionnaire with that final mailing? So thank you for answering that. And I do want to remind folks, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A, not the chat. I see some folks are submitting some questions, and I don't want to miss your question. The next question we have is, can you give some successful event examples of hosting a census-related event?
I'll grab that one for sure. I'll give an example of a car caravan event, and I'll give a general example of how food distribution events have gone. New Brunswick, and I'm going to call them out in a good way. The New Brunswick teams got together and collaborated and put together a 2-hour car caravan through New Brunswick. And if you know New Brunswick is not just home to Rutgers, but it has a hard to count population beyond students. And it was a community-wide collaboration and attracted a tremendous amount of attention for 2 hours throughout the entire town. They went to places that they didn't even think they were going to go. The police helped them with that. They had a fire truck with them. They had nonprofits with them. They had music. So it created a buzz. The very successful in-person events have been going on for some time. Atlantic City has been hosting, their team has been hosting kiosks for quite some, mobile kiosks for quite some time at tables that are set up with proper social distancing. They have had some incentives to give away that they've gotten locally to promote, to incent people to fill out the census. There were some food cards given out that our friends in Atlantic City were able to procure from locally as a donation. And in general, food distribution sites have been great places to walk the line, essentially, and ask people to fill out their census or provide them with information. COVID-19 testing sites are presenting themselves as a good possibility, an excellent possibility. Some of the ones I know, I can name one that happened in Brooklyn because we were told about it. That was probably one of the most successful census activities that they've held there in what was a tough place for COVID at one point, and happily that's diminishing. So those are a couple of examples. We've seen chalkathons, we've seen great events in Passaic County, particularly in Patterson and in Passaic City, similar types of events. Also virtual events that have been held as roundtables. One event, the folks in Patterson utilized the MQAs and the voice program for the MQAs and had a phone-a-thon in so people could fill out their census. So loads of activities taking place that have been successful.
So thanks, Eric. And that gets to the next question, which was, folks would like to engage, but some folks are really concerned, even if they do have a mask, even if they are being socially distant. So thank you for mentioning some virtual ideas. I don't know if panelists would like to speak to some other virtual or perhaps more socially distant options for folks who may want to get engaged.
I mean, if you're an organization that has a robust phone network or texting, like if you have folks' phone numbers, if you're a house of worship or you're a business, you know businesses that have like their marketing lists, you know, those are helpful lists to start reaching out and making those contacts and saying, can you text them and just send a reminder and say, remember to fill out the census, here's the website. And, you know, a lot of the things that Eric's mentioning, flyering, chalkathons, like these don't require in-person contact the same way. I do think that direct contact remains the most effective way to make sure that someone has completed their census, like they can see it in front of them. But in some cases, I really encourage folks to lean on the phone-based option. There are phone numbers for all the 13 languages that are available for the census that people can complete over the phone. And so even if you're at a distance, you know, you can encourage folks to complete the phone response.
Just to add on to that, the Friends and Family Outreach Program doesn't even require that you have lists, because it asks you to call 5 friends, family, or neighbors and ask them how they're doing, and tell them that, and talk to them about filling out the census and ask them to do it right then and there. As I said, we're kind of romancing the idea of a friends and family text approach as well. People will pick up their phone if they know you. The key to the friends and family is then to ask them to make calls and create a massive phone chain. So a well-organized effort will be very, very effective. And again, all the scripts are available to you and how the program works at census.nj.gov.
So another question that we have related to events, someone wanted to clarify what is a mobile questionnaire assistant and how can they be utilized? So Jeff, I think that one is for you.
Yeah, so we have a staff of about 600 to 700 throughout our region, and each one of those staff members has a tablet. And again, this is a sworn census employee. And the whole MQA program was the idea of taking the census to neighborhoods that didn't have the resources to maybe fill it out online. So our original intent was to go to laundromats or restaurants or bodegas in areas that are low responding and set up a table, have staff there who speak the language, and we have hundreds of languages that are spoken. And I know there's a reference to a telethon that we did in Passaic earlier. That was a Bengali telethon. And, you know, while we don't have one of our main, 13 toll-free telephone numbers doesn't support the Bengali community, but we have staff who speak Bengali, and we had 6 or 7 what we call CRRs, or these representatives there with their iPads that were taking information over the phone and self-responding for that particular household. So that those are available. We have kind of tweaked it now. We're not really creating our own events anymore. We're supporting our partner events. So we're going to places like food distribution sites, church services that are outside. We just had an event in Brooklyn where we enumerated over 300 households in about a 3-hour period. And a partner invited us to a hospital. They know their employees have been working a lot and they didn't have time to fill out the census. So they provided free lunch to every employee who either would fill out their census right then and there or showed some type of proof that they already filled it out online. So just a wide range of things that we're here to do. And these CRRs can also help you if you do just want a flyer in a particular neighborhood. Our staff are there to help you to hand out resources or just to put things on people's porches or front doors to share the message about the census.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Someone also mentioned, can we do things like a challenge, like fill out your census and challenge 10 more people to do it? And I think that was getting to Eric's friends and family campaign. And we've also done something similar with Twitter or with social media to tag people to submit their response once you've submitted yours. Another question we have is, from Miriam, will enumerators receive addresses to visit on August 10th or earlier? I have an event on August 6th, and I'm wondering if I should tell people they won't receive a knock on their door if they complete their forms. Is August 6th too late to guarantee no visit from the Census Bureau?
Yeah, it's not too late. So right now the plan is to start knocking on doors, and again, assuming it's safe to do so, on August 11th. There is a possibility that we may open one of our 8 offices across New Jersey to start enumeration a little bit earlier. And we should know that sometime this week. And if that were the case, they would start knocking on doors in their geography beginning July 30th. But it's certainly in the majority of New Jersey, it's fine to say we will not be out there before knocking on doors before August 11th.
Thank you, Jeff. And we have 2 comments from folks. One is saying, just a reminder that you can respond via phone, and it would be important to highlight that in the media. They haven't been seeing that in the media as much as they would like. And another person mentioning that July 15th is the new tax deadline, so outside the post office might also be a good place to put some information. So another question we have is, are volunteers involved in assisting enumerators? And if so, are they given PPE, personal protective equipment?
Yeah, so as far as data collection goes, you have to be a Census Bureau employee in order to collect data on the 2020 census. So we do not invite volunteers to join us. We certainly work with our partners if we need access into certain buildings or maybe gated communities in getting the word out, but we do not have volunteers join us at all when we're actually out there knocking on doors.
And thanks, Jeff. And a second part to that question is there any thought for future of paying individual respondents, especially in low response areas, for sharing their valuable information?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can tell you on our current surveys, we're out there knocking on doors every day of every year for things like the unemployment rate and the consumer price index. And they've been doing studies over the past few decades on paying respondents. And surprisingly, it hasn't shown that it's a big improvement in getting cooperation from households if they are paid. But as of right now, there is absolutely no plan for 2020, and we'll see about 2030.
Thanks, Jeff. And someone is asking, they know someone who has filled out their form and has received follow-up twice. Is there a way someone can confirm that their response has been received, that their form has been received?
Yeah, so we started our coverage improvement operation. And this is if there's something that maybe there's a quality issue with the response that was submitted. We have outbound callers who are calling only households that have filled it out. And I'll give you one example. Households that have a college student, and they list the college student as living at that family address, that household address, but they also indicate that this person usually lives somewhere else. That's when we call to make sure, did that student really live at home for the majority of the time, usually live there as of April 1st, 2020, or did they live off campus or at a dormitory? Because, for instance, college students should be counted where they usually live or stay as of April 1st, which is either in that off-campus community or living in that college dormitory. So that's the reason we make calls. We will never ask for anything that you haven't submitted. So in other words, it's the same content or the same questions we're asking about that are part of the 2020 census. And it's important to note, at no time, whether we're knocking on doors or making telephone calls, will we ask for your social security number. We'll never ask for bank account and credit card information. We never ask for money, and we will never ask for anything on behalf of a political party.
Thank you. And so we have 2 final questions. I do want to be respectful of people's time because it is after 1 o'clock. One question is, our local committee has had several conversations about getting into apartment buildings where the managers aren't being very helpful. Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's extremely. So we do have some promotion material for apartment managers, for landlords, that talk about why the census is so important to the community and what it means to them specifically. So I would say check out some of our materials at 2020census.gov. Reach out to one of our partnership specialists. We can join you in having that conversation with that local landlord or apartment manager.
Thanks, Jeff. I hope that will be helpful. And our last question, Susanna, what's the best way to help faith community partners participate in Faith Weekend? Are there certain resources we can share with them?
So the Bureau has its Census Faith Weekend materials that it had for the previous Faith Weekend, which was at the end of March. Those are available. I'm going to put that into the chat window right now. And that contains some basic information about the census, some list of of possible activities. But the other group that I want to highlight is Faith in Public Life, which is a national organization that is across a lot of different denominations and religious organizations. And they have a census toolkit that includes some materials like sample sermon material, lots of good material in there. But I think the big thing is really just taking 10 to 15 minutes out of a service and saying either before or after, this is a time to do your census. If you haven't, take out your phone, and complete the census right now. And if you've already completed it, take out your phone and text 5 people on your list and ask them if they've completed the census. That kind of outreach is probably as effective as any of the, well-tested messaging that people have out there.
I can also add that the state is working through its outreach efforts, not just through the Census Bureau, but in other places as well, to engage the faith community. We have an Office of Faith-Based Initiatives at the Department of State. They have been continually involved in reaching out to the faith community, as well as we're working on a very active program that will, we're going to support an active program that is being that is being developed right now. More about that as it comes out. That will actually happen mostly after Push Week. It's set to launch, but we're hoping to get some additional things done during Push Week as well. But the one post-Push Week is going to be important because we're going to need to have that community heavily engaged, that faith community heavily engaged as we move into September. And that's likely where that's going to start to happen, where that's going to continue to happen. I had a question for Jeff, actually. Will there be some additional new materials for this particular Faith Week? Or will it essentially be the same materials? Can we just repurpose them?
Yeah, I believe the majority are going to be the same materials. I know they're putting out new videos and things like that that can be used for the general public for any type of audience that deal showing our staff with wearing PPE when they're knocking on doors and things like that. But that's really the only change that I suspect we'll see.
What I would suggest to everybody is to please, particularly at the local complete count committee level, many of you are working with your faith community. Make sure that they're engaged and you're collaborating with them for these events and get them involved as a resource, if not as a tip of the spear activity for your activities during not just Faith Week, but during Push Week.
And I know I said last question, but we do have one other question, and I think it's important to ask, which is in regards to counting the homeless, is September still the target date? And is the census working off a list where to find the homeless on the street?
Yeah, great question. So the dates were changed. It's September 22nd through the 24th will be our service-based enumeration operation. That's where we'll visit over a 3-day period every mobile food van, soup kitchen, homeless shelter, and conduct an enumeration or collect an administrative paper list from that. And that's what we're hoping is they'll just provide us with the paper list rather than bringing teams of people there to interview people given social distancing guidelines and the concerns over COVID-19. And then one night we'll actually go out and do the homeless count one of those nights. And that'll be, shortly after 12 midnight, our staff will go out there and begin doing that. We are still collecting information. We certainly know there's been shelters and soup kitchens that have closed. There's been others that have opened up. And we certainly understand that there may be new locations that the homeless, if they're experiencing homelessness, they may be staying. Please reach out to the Census Bureau. We'd love to collect that information to create that exhaustive list so that when it is time to go out and do our homeless count, that we're visiting every possible site that we're aware of.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And just a reminder to folks, people are asking, we will be sharing a copy of the PowerPoint that was given today, both PowerPoints, as well as a recording of the webinar. So
that'll all be available on our website as well, on the same link that you register your event. There's a button for view the recording where it'll be available.
All right, folks. So in the interest of time, I think we'll end it here. So Peter, and folks are asking about the chat, and we'll share a lot of the links that we discussed today as well.
Yep. Okay, thanks everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about the census and push week. Please register your events, and we look forward to having more, to assisting in any way we can. We'll include our contact information so you can reach out to us. And we don't have to spam Jeff, but the rest of the regional office staff is also very helpful for organizations.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating, and thank you again for all that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Peter and Alana, for hosting this. What a great conversation. So you guys are amazing.
Thanks,
Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.